it's Reagan and welcome back to another video. Alright, today I'm going to be chatting through the top books I recommend for you guys to read this spring. A selection and collection of books I have for you guys today kind of vary in tone and style. Well, not necessarily in style. A lot of them are fantasy, but some of them are more lighthearted and fast-paced, while some of them are perhaps darker, but all of them are actually shorter than perhaps what sometimes I usually recommend. I believe they're all under 500 pages, which is shorter for me. And I did that on purpose because with the changing weather, at least for me personally, I have been wanting to go outside and do things more, so I've been more drawn to shorter length books. So I kept that in mind when I selected the books to talk about today. The first book I'm going to talk about is just such a good time, and that is Alloy of Law, or just the Mistborn second trilogy by Brandon Sanderson. I have been reading the original Mistborn trilogy recently. I just wrapped it up, but I've also already read the second trilogy as well. This is a flintlock fantasy and is basically Brandon Sanderson's interpretation of a Western style novel mixed with his really cool magic system that exists within this Mistborn world. Basically, in a world where metal can be controlled by humans, let's add guns to the equation and see kind of what happens. It's so cool. And of course, the series also has a very gripping mystery at its center, but it's also full of so much humor, lighthearted antics, and adventure with a really compelling and likable main character, Wax and Wayne, who are just like outlaw, fighting, duo, crime-solving heroes. It's a highly original, highly entertaining series. I would really recommend picking it up. You do have to read the original Mistborn trilogy before reading this. I think it's important for context and for continuity in terms of storyline, as well as a lot of stuff that is referenced in here does spoil what happened in the first one. But in my opinion, that's just a great excuse to read a great series if you haven't read it. But if you have read it and you haven't picked up the second Mistborn trilogy, I would really recommend it. It's just so great. It's the after, you know what I mean? It's just a wonderful story, and I think it's perfect for the spring. It's short, it's like a punch to the gut. It's so entertaining. I have a recommendation that's a little less lighthearted, and that is the 5th season by N.K. Jemisin. I am currently in the middle of the second book right now. This is a very recent read for me and a quick favorite. I'm absolutely obsessed with this series. It's just so original and unique, and another very fast-paced fantasy read that will really hook you from beginning to end. It's also not that long. It's under 500 pages, as I said. This book is set in a land called the Stillness, which is ironic because the land in which they live is anything but still. Humankind and humanity is basically confronted with the end of the world as they know it. The earth is very much alive and it is angry. Earthquakes, tsunamis, volcanoes erupt at any point in time and end civilization over and over again. Humankind, though, is not one to give up easily. They've evolved in a way where basically stone lore is passed from civilization to civilization on how to try to survive. However, because humankind is constantly ending and constantly having to rebuild itself, a lot of things are lost through time, and what they're focusing on is really survival focused, and a lot of things like art, music, and culture have become much less important. On top of that, there are individuals who have magic who can actually control and harness the earth's power, but instead of being praised and used to maybe help society survive longer, they are enslaved and basically chained by the very people that they live around, and their powers are harnessed and kept like very tightly under lock and key. This is a multi-perspective story, and it is just riveting from page 1 to where I'm at right now, which is the middle of the second book, and it's just one of the most unique worlds I've ever come across. The writing and the literary style of this is also so well done. It's captivating not only in its mystery, but the way N.K. Jemisin is able to express things as they're happening is just amazing. It's a book that is definitely not full of info dumping. If anything, you're just grasping for any type of like reality. You're just wanting to know what in the world is going on. This book also touches on a lot of very interesting topics of identity, race, gender, language, humanity, civilization, all sorts of different things like that. It's a very serious and dark book, not YA at all, but an incredible novel. So happy to have read it and can't wait to continue to read the rest of this series. Next was a bit of a surprise read for me, and that was Crown of Feathers by Nikki Powell-Preto. This is a great first book in a YA fantasy novel that I read earlier this year, and I think is a perfect spring read. Another very fast-paced, shorter fantasy novel that is just going to keep you interested from page 1. This is set in a world where basically an empire was created through the power of two queens and their like magical abilities and their warriors called the Phoenix Riders. The Phoenix Riders were praised for being powerful warriors who could also control magic and also use phoenixes to fight. However, when the two sisters had a falling out, the empire was ripped apart and these Phoenix Riders are no longer, they're extinct, and animal magic is looked down upon by the kind of current most powerful empire hundreds of years later. This is a story that actually follows two sisters, and they're very, very different, and they have a lot of conflict between each other, but they both dream of becoming Phoenix Riders, and they have been hiding their animal magic since birth. It's a very complex sisterly bond, but we follow one girl who basically disguises herself as a boy, stumbles into the small Phoenix Rider like battalion that still exists and tries to enter their ranks, but when she does, she also runs into her sister, whom she hasn't seen in a very long time. I loved this book, really took me by surprise. I thought the sisterly dynamics were so interesting and complex. I also really loved the aerial combat and the magic in this world. I thought was so interesting. It's also multi-perspective, so you really get a very expansive viewpoint of this world for it being maybe a shorter fantasy novel. I thought this novel was a very strong first book to a new series, and I cannot wait to read the next one when it comes out next year. But I would just say pick this up if you haven't. It's so good. The next two books I'm gonna recommend are in the more light-hearted category. The first one being Tempest and Slaughter by Tamara Pierce. I guess the word slaughter's in the title, but don't let that sway you. Honestly, this book just felt so nostalgic for me. I hadn't actually read the original series that this is technically a prequel to. We basically follow a character, Aram Draper, who becomes and is a very powerful mage in one of Tamara's other series that is older than this one, but we basically follow him here before he becomes that great mage. You see him from a small child into early adulthood, grow up, go to magical classes, make close friends, and also you get a lot of context for some of the political distress that occurs later in her other series. I loved this book so much. Honestly, to give it a close parallel, it has similar vibes to, I would say, Harry Potter. The plot is nothing similar, the writing style is nothing similar, but the feeling of this young boy coming to a magic school, becoming part of a trio of friends, trying to stop evil and save the day, and also just like have a fun time, struck true, and it was just a really joy to read. I can't wait to read the next book in this series, but I personally just enjoyed every second and every page of the story. I had a smile on my face the whole time. It really brought me back to that like place, and it was so much fun. I really loved it a lot. And it was so interesting to see such a powerful character in like their childhood, because you can really see how people kind of take greatness upon themselves throughout their life, and they have to grow to get there, and it's really illustrated through this, so also would recommend this. Next should be no surprise, it is currently one of my favorite middle grade series, but I just think it's a perfect read to pick up for spring and to continue through summer as well, and that is Keeper of the Lost Cities by Shannon Messenger. I have currently read 4 books within this series. I think they're so great, full of friendship and adventure and mystery. It has so many deeper themes as well, grief, loss, finding a new home. You just basically see a very resilient and strong group of children throughout these books encounter the odds and try to persevere through them, and I love it so much. But the first one, basically you follow our main character Sophie, who has always been a very unusual child. She has a photographic memory, she skipped a lot of grades, her schoolmates kind of look down on her for this, and she's always kind of felt ostracized and alone. On top of this, she can also read minds. However, one day she stumbles upon another boy who's just like her. He can read minds as well, and she's basically told that she's not human. She's actually an elf. From there, she's swept away to the elven world where she encounters so many new things, this beautiful, buzzing, jewel-like city. She starts to attend a magic school and meet all types of new friends. But from there, she also finds herself in the center of a very dark mystery that is endangering her, her family, and the world as they know it. And that's kind of what is happening throughout each book. Each book really builds on itself so well. I think it's such a great time. I love it so much. So if you haven't picked up this series or tried it, I would really recommend. And the last book I'm gonna recommend is not fantasy, but is a great book, and I think something perfect for the springtime. And that is Station 11 by Emily St. John Mandel. This is a book I read about 4 years ago now and loved it so much. I feel like I recommend this book a lot to coworkers. I made my brother read it. I gave a copy to my mom. It's just a really interesting story. This is set basically shortly after the world ended from a unknown pathogen. It's set kind of currently post-world end, right as the world is ending and right before it. The majority of this story is told through a traveling Shakespearean theater group as they kind of travel around the now ruined United States of America. And you also kind of follow all these different types of perspective as you try to piece together like what, where, and why, and how the world ended, and what that means for humanity now and kind of the aftermath of it all. It's a really charming book that has a lot of heart in it, but it also really makes you encounter like humankind and its choices, and ultimately like if we go too far, can we face a reality like this? It's also a story of like human perseverance. I mean, still wanting to showcase and entertain through art, I think is interesting while the world has completely ended around them. This is a book that, again, I love so much. I honestly should probably give it a reread soon. It's a very popular one, but if you haven't read this yet, would recommend. Hey guys, those are the top books I would recommend you guys picking up this spring. Let me know down below some books you think I should read or anyone else should read during this season, as I would love to know. And I'll see you guys soon with another video soon. Goodbye.